delineated the deficiencies that we found, but at its core, it required them to do some investigation on their own, with their own experts, if you will. There are things that we can see that cause us grave concern, but we don't necessarily have the exact expertise or access to address that. So again, following the code, what we did is we asked them to do 8 things specifically, and they generally dealt with having a structural engineer come out and do an evaluation of, in this case specifically, the roof and the first to second story floor joists. We required them to have a licensed master electrician come out and do what we were asking is an overall property evaluation of the electrical system. The exact same thing with a licensed master plumber. So I would tell you in a big picture terms, those various departments of the city, those experts had concerns on what they were overall seeing. And so what we've asked them to do is we gave them a certain amount of time to hire these folks on their own. They can pick whoever they need. They need to be licensed individuals, and provide an overall report to the owner, who they can provide that to the city, honestly, to either confirm the city's suspicions or to rebut the city's suspicions. We gave them a more than reasonable amount of time. On the day that was due, we were contacted by the owner, who said that he did not get the original notice. Now, we hand-delivered it, so we know the property got it. We also sent the notice via certified mail to the property address of record, not supposed to, and it was signed for. But I guess out of an abundance of caution, we met with him, heard his story, and said, okay, if you're saying you did not know about this till today, how much time do you need then to complete these inspections? And he asked for an extension of time, and we granted him that extension of time that he asked for, and that was actually August 1st. So on August 1st, we heard back from the property, and they provided us with 5 of the 8 reports, with the promise that the other 3 would be delivered the next day. On August 2nd, they did deliver those other 3. So we are now in the process of looking at the information that they provided us. I'm going to cut to the chase a little bit and tell you that the information that they provided us is very, very inadequate. I want to let Don do his full review of the information, but I can just tell you from looking at what was submitted, I don't know that it was even necessarily a good, I don't know that to give much credit even for attempting to do what they were asked to do. But I just want you to know where we are most likely, or at least potentially headed with this, is as we go through these various stages in following the ordinance, this could absolutely end up with us recommending this to the Housing and Structures Board to again continue to follow the ordinance, which is they would set a public hearing date where the owner would come in and the city would say these are the deficiencies we found as far as an unsafe, dilapidated structure, and the owner could say, I agree, or no way, I don't agree with anything you found, and then the Housing and Structure Board would be legally advised, and they could direct him what to do, which again, I'm speculating, but most likely would be to make those repairs, or somehow they could ask him to somehow rebut the city's findings or what have you. So it's a legal proceeding, but that's probably where we are headed on this property. A little bit of difference between this and the Lighthouse Inn. The Lighthouse Inn, both of the properties are legally existing non-conforming from a use standpoint, but the Lighthouse Inn's dangerous structure standpoint was immediate life, health, safety. It involved gas, it involved every building and every structure. This is up and still operational. They have addressed what I would tell you are the immediate life, health, safety issues that the fire department and the building official identified. So it's not quite to the level of Lighthouse Inn, but we're still taking it very, very serious because we have some suspicions that there could be some fairly serious violations here.
Chris, is
Yes.
this a local owner?
No, well, yes, ma'am, not in Euless, but in the state. And it was interesting when he came to meet with the staff, he brought I think he identified him as a friend or a consultant or something with him who was a former building official for the city of Dallas. So he didn't say anything at the meeting, but he was in attendance.
What's an example of a serious flaw, but it's not a life-threatening kind of flaw?
Building official and fire department, for instance, have reason to believe that some of the ceiling joist or the trusses are have a large deflection, several inch deflection, and they may not be structurally sound, but it's not enough to where we can look at it and say, oh yes, this is absolutely 100% not structurally sound. It's enough that you need a structural engineer to look at it and say it either is or isn't structurally sound and needs to be repaired in the following way, or needs to be torn down, one or the other. So that might be an example. When you get into plumbing and electrical systems, some other things like that. Everything I've talked to you about so far is kind of conditions wise, and I told you it's a legally existing non-conforming use. The other thing I would tell you is, and we talked about this Thursday night a little bit on the hot tax and the audit of the hot tax, what we've done in the past. The city has always made an argument that even these hotel motels are legally existing non-conforming uses. And if our code says if you change your use, then you lose your grandfathered status. And we have in the past made the argument that if more than 51% of your use is no longer a hotel motel, that we would define by you are not paying your state hotel occupancy tax. So by your own admission and your own, how you conduct your business, you're no longer a hotel motel, you're more of a boarding house or multifamily, then you have changed your use, and thus you've lost your non-conforming status.
You're gonna have to reapply for new CO.
Well,
You're not conforming.
you're not going to be,
Non-conforming.
And when they reapply, we wouldn't issue.
we may or may not issue, it's not even a CO, in this case it's a specific use permit and then a CO.
There you go.
Now, I will tell you that from a legal standpoint, this is where we get into, that's our interpretation, and I'm sure they would have a separate interpretation. And Wayne has advised us that, we can defend that position, but we may or may not be completely successful with that. The law gets into, even our own ordinance, it talks about that you willingly change your use. So you can speculate that one of these owners might say when this was all brought forward, well, I didn't understand that, so I didn't mean to do that, so I didn't willingly change my use. I'll go backwards, and now all of a sudden you haven't lost your non-conforming status. What we are kind of wading into with this is using the International Property Maintenance Code, and this goes through Wayne's office. They're the ones that kind of highlighted this to us, is set aside that hotel motel tax piece and what you really are. Because as we told you in some other places, the other side of that game is some of these owners will just pay the hotel motel tax, even if folks are in essence living there. It's like a cheap insurance. I paid the hotel motel tax. I am a hotel motel. You can't say otherwise. In the International Property Maintenance Code, and again, that is not a Euless specific code. We have adopted it, but it is much more far-reaching. There are definitions for hotel motel that talk about what you and I would consider to be things that are commonplace provided in a hotel motel. For instance, linen service, maid service, those kind of things. And if you're a hotel motel, then you provide these common things. That the structure is set up for, not for permanent residency. There are minimum square footages per, basically the International Property Maintenance Code said you have to have 70 square feet, which is not a lot, but it's still 70 square foot per occupant of a hotel room. If you've ever rented a hotel room, it'll say it's a 4-person hotel room where you can do 5 with the rollaway. Well, if you're really following the law, that's because there's 70 square foot for the first person and 60 for so many other. Okay. When we enter these rooms as part of these inspections, what we are finding is 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 people living in one of these units. And when I say living, I'm telling you, it's apparent. There are full-size refrigerators or a full-size, and these are not built as suites. I mean, imagine just an old-style motel room with 2 beds and And then on the wall, instead of a TV, there's a full-size refrigerator. We had one and talked about an immediate thing. We walked into one and the fire marshal, and there was a guy in there with a charcoal grill.
Oh,
So-
jeez.
Never a good idea. So, everything I talked about that we're going down through the Housing and Structures Board is structural to the building. Is it dilapidated or is it not? Does it need to be repaired? Concurrently, we're also doing just kind of a use piece. You say this is what you are, and here's the definition of that. So one of the things that letter asked for also was, can you show us, and really what it comes down to is through maintenance records or some sort of a log or what have you, that you provide daily housekeeping, or you provide linen change out, or whatever that may be, that would meet, and I'm going back to the International Covenant, that meets those definitions of services associated with a hotel or motel. So we're going through that right now. I know there's a lot of times you drive by somewhere like this and you think, good night, that nobody's ever doing anything, what's ever gonna happen? It takes time. We are actively pursuing all those avenues. These folks are doing what a lot of people do when you knock on the door and talk to them. They have run down there and they're starting to paint the outside of the building. It's one of those things where we appreciate the effort, but that is not one of the issues that we raised. It was a brick building. I wish that they were going to paint it, they would do a good job. If you take a look at it pretty quick, they've oversprayed the windows and oversprayed the shingles on the roof, and I mean, it's not even a good paint job. So I don't want you to think the city's gone down there and said, you must paint your building. That's not what we've done. We've raised a bigger question, and we, at this point in time, have asked them to self-identify or explain those pieces. Now, the other part of the code is, and what we've identified in the letter is, if you don't do this, or if you do an inadequate job of this, then the city reserves the right, which is granted to us through the law, to come in and perform those activities at the city's expense. In other words, we can go hire a structural engineer, potentially, and go through and do these things ourselves to make that evaluation. If you ended up at Housing and Structures Board someday, undoubtedly we'd be saying this were our findings, and he'd be saying, well, here's my findings, and that's why you get to be on the Housing and Structures Board, I guess, to listen to that stuff. But we just kind of wanted you to know where we were on that.
And it may be necessary for us to expend some money here, which we really would much prefer to get some voluntary compliance here and heed to do the evaluations. But it's not unlike preparing for a court case at some point. You have to have your evidence if you're going to go before the Housing and Structures, and you have to have your expert witnesses in the form of structural engineers and so forth. So obviously, we may at some point have to spend some money before we go to Housing and Structures to demonstrate that there are real issues that need to be addressed. Our guys at one point, I think they had a concern that the carpet was perhaps what was holding up the floor, not the floor. And so, you know, but you need the structural engineers to be able to verify whether or not there is a structural integrity issue or not. So,
You know, from the long view, we have quite a few places like this. Is it worth the effort to look in the long term of having inspections like the apartment inspection was, only do it with the hotels? I mean, you're gonna have the newer hotels where they're gonna be class 1, and you're gonna inspect them once every 3 years. But to deal with things like this, you know, Best Western and what is it, Mid-Cities Inn, I think is the next one down the road, and a few others that we have. I know we would end up having to put on additional help to do this, but
you know, and the other avenue, we can do inspections, but then you have to know where you're headed. Obviously, Housing and Structures
Right.
is one of those. The other side of that's going to be the potential, when it's non-conforming, is to amortize. But of course, then that is typically a very long, drawn-out
Right.
deal. But in some of these, we may be left with no other options. And I do think it's something that it will not be inexpensive to do, because most of that typically involves litigation at some point if you go to pursue those. But the conditions of some of these are such that we, at some point, may have to do that. Certainly, our hope would be is you would go in, ask them to do their evaluations, use the reports, they develop a repair plan, they work with our building department to do the repairs that are necessary. But that doesn't typically work that way. And so we are, I would say, becoming more aggressive in our willingness to use the Housing and Structures Board process and see that through. And then ultimately, we may have to pursue the amortization process on some of these. When they just, again, you're not, you recognize that folks need a place to live, but probably putting 9 people in a hotel room that's been converted to an apartment and it doesn't have a kitchen or anything like that, and people moved in refrigerators and charcoal grills is probably not the best approach either, so.
Well, I can't believe those floors on the second floor of that building are structurally sound enough to hold a full-size refrigerator, because your
Or
house
9
was square inch on
people.
one of
I
those.
think they found one that actually had been padlocked from the inside, like, so like, it was, from a hotel, you would go and put your key and open the door, and the folks had actually installed their own locks from the interior.
Well, you gotta
So-
protect your meth lab, you don't
But,
want
but
just
you,
anybody walking in.
you would suggest from that you can't have a daily maid service if the apartment is being locked from the inside with a padlock of sorts or whatever. So, I mean, there's some real challenges with some of these,
Oh,
so
I think it's a great step.
Yeah.
we'll
When we
continue to
started
keep you
the-
posted and,
When we started the PMI apartment program, we always say apartment, but really the PMI is property maintenance inspections. We absolutely had discussions about, do you apply that to these type of facilities? And we said, no, we have more than we can say grace over just starting this program with apartments. Obviously, now you fast forward 5 years, it's been successful.
And we've only got, well, we don't have any tier 3s left anymore, right?
that's correct.
So,
Correct.
So the idea that could you now,
Add
do you have a
those
good
in?
enough handle to expand it? I mean, that could be kicked around. You talked earlier about.
Well, we
actually
don't
need
have
more
that
pool
many,
people.
and
It's-
we don't have
it's
that
still
many
tough.
hotels. How many total hotels do we have actually that we would inspect in the city?
Well, it would
Depends on what you
We-
define as a hotel.
Because we wouldn't do the
Extended
ones
stay
in the airport.
hotels.
There's
We wouldn't
not.
do the ones on the airport properties.
No, you really, I mean, you have La Quinta, the Best Western, you have Mid-Cities Inn.
Is that
you have
one next to Verna's a hotel?
Great Western, you have.
That 3-story thing?
Yes.
Yes.
I think it's about 10, if you use the
You
most
have
generous
less than
definition.
10, yeah.
Hotel motel.
You have the 183 motel,
Yeah,
Oh.
so,
I'm sure that passed inspection though.
so,
About 300 rooms total, maybe,
I mean, I think you could get your arms around it,
quickly.
so. So that's
There are
really
cities
just
that do
bringing it to
property
your
maintenance.
attention, if you should get, if you should hear that,
There are cities that do rent
Rent.
house. Richardson does rent house inspections.
Now, if they paint it, and I'm always asking this question and I should remember this, but, and he goes to flip it, is the new owner able to continue down this path, or is there then a new change of ownership, new SUV?
So let's just say that the
Ownership.
property was perfectly structurally sound and we didn't have these issues of use or safety. Change in ownership is not a terminating qualification for legally existing non-conforming.
as long as it continues its use and does not remain vacant and dormant for 6 months,
Right.
it continues on to whatever the owner might be. If someone, let's just say he shut it down and didn't operate it for 6 months and all the tenants vacated, then it would potentially lose its non-conforming with,
But this SUP is not tied to the business owner and all
This
that?
does
Again,
not
this-
even
he has
have
no-
it
he
there.
doesn't-
Oh,
he
that's
does not
there
have
is
this
no
issue.
SUP, it's just.
Y'all are just
simply
saying SUP if something were to
non-conforming,
change.
right,
Okay.
right, right.
Hotel motels require, since 1997, a SUP. So La Quinta and Best Western have specific use permits. This property, 183 motel, they do not. That's the grandfather piece.
Okay.
That's illegal existing non-conforming piece.
Plus it's a highway 10 overlay district too.
Well, it requires SUP, but
Right.
these guys are just old, they don't have it.
Exactly.
Is our zoning board the structural?
Yes.
The ZBA acts as the Housing and Structures Board.
So same people would
Yes.
listen to this?
They put on a different set of hats and they become Housing and Structures Board. So, a couple other things here before I go into this, and I'll stop doing one other quick one. You'll see an item on your agenda, just want to make you aware, next meeting, to authorize the mayor enter into an agreement with Texas Harris Methodist for the sponsorship of a nurses station in their new ICU unit. You know, over the years, as Texas Harris has expanded The cities have, I think back when they did a maternity ward, the city sponsored a birth room. They are doing an 18-bed expansion of the ICU there. They are woefully not understaffed, their facilities are woefully inadequate for the current use of that facility, and they're expanding that. And what they have done is that one of their methods of fundraising is to approach various groups to try and sponsor either a room or something within the facility. And they've approached the three cities, Hearst, Euless, and Bedford, about sponsoring one of the nurses' stations. It would be not unlike the birthing room, where they would forever hang a plaque that says this particular nursing station has been sponsored by Hearst, Euless, and Bedford. The requested donation is $10,000 from each of the cities for that nursing station, and Hearst and Bedford have already approved their contributions, and they're asking, and I have visited with Wayne about that, and there is an agreement where they have to agree to, obviously, to recognize the city's donation for that, and they have to agree to maintain the nurses station, and there's a certain amount of things, and obviously the finding of benefit is that that hospital serves our community with an ICU ward for the benefit of our citizens, and so we would ask for a $10,000 sponsorship for that nurses station at Texas Harris.
I think it's important that we do it because it is our hospital.
It is our community hospital, and we're the majority of our, obviously there's choices, but many of our citizens attend, so, or go, so. And then another one that is not really, I just want to ask you all, if there's anybody that feels strongly about when you enter the City Hall building, for whatever reason, the plate above the doors at City Hall, that plate was done in a gold, and then the words City Hall are attached to that plate. That gold plating is in terrible disrepair and looks horrible, and there is a, for lack of a better term, kind of a bronze cap or cover that we can put over that is not that expensive. But if someone was attached to that gold, I did not want to do that without asking you.
There's a gold plate up there?
There is a gold plate
Send
up
it
there.
away, send it away.
And I don't
It's
even know.
bothered me for years.
Yeah. I don't even know that the letters there that say City Hall are necessary, because the
Yeah.
building says City Hall. But there is no real way to bring that back to a nice gold finish. There's nothing else on our buildings really that is gold. Everything is kind of that bronze.
It's ugly,
This
it's
is kind of-
faded, and it's not necessary.
It's outdated and it looks really bad.
This is kind of like the paint color on the freeway.
Yeah.
Nobody but the people in this room can ever notice it.
I know, but we started to do that, and I thought, y'all walk into city council meeting and the gold plate be gone and the words gone, and y'all say, what in the world did y'all do? So
I know it's there.
it's,
But send it to the
It's-
museum.
it is, well, I think it actually just gets covered up. It won't go away.
Oh, okay.
It'll just get covered up and you won't see the gold anymore.
One of these days, Dorota, you're gonna be telling the council, well, I didn't think anybody would notice if we did that, so they'll say, no, they would notice.
But anyway, it is, obviously, it's on our city hall building, so I wanted to ask you about it, but it is just that it has tarnished over the years and does not look good.
Yeah, it's an eyesore.
So,
It'll still say City Hall though?
not there. It says city hall on the
Above it.
building, but that little, just the little gold letters over the
I'm
doors.
gonna have to drive by just to look at it now.
But there's a photo of it if you go back to your main lead.
Oh, there it is.
Anyway,
And then, quickly on Arbor Days for 2017, we do not obviously anticipate that Glade Park would be ready to host any sort of event by 2017. Well, it says City of Euless,
Right.
but I think I said it said City Hall. It
right,
says
so City
of
Hall's on
Euless.
the gold above the
But
doors.
City Hall's right there.
So will it still say City Hall?
Probably not.
Oh,
If you need it to, we can do it, but we'll need to do it in different lettering so that it will show off of the
It
bronze.
doesn't need to be there.
I don't think it
Just
is.
cover it up.
You have your wayfinder signs,
Yeah,
everyone
you have
will
your
find their way.
wayfinding sign.
I'm sure streets could figure out some way to make a little City Hall to affix to it.
We can
Or
look at
parts.
lettering and maybe bring y'all a suggestion for that if you feel like it needs to say City Hall. The problem is that the current lettering is bronze, and bronze on bronze is not gonna show. So we
Yeah.
would have to find something
Well,
that would show.
Out of 4 buildings or 4 buildings with a library, I think we need one that identifies this as City Hall. Otherwise, people are gonna think it's the water department or something. I think we do need something there to
We
say,
have signs there,
Let us look and
No.
see. There may be a good option.
by the tree.
I just don't wanna put bronze on bronze
I
and it's
understand.
not gonna show
I
up. So let us look for an option on that, but
we can swing by Home Depot and
we'll
I'll donate the letters.
paste the letters on there. Okay, we'll look at that. So back to Arbor Days, we are of the opinion that Arbor Days would probably still need to reside at Midway Park next year. But wanted to make sure if anybody had any concerns about that. Ray said there's a few lessons learned from the last year, that there are things they'll tweak and do a little better. But we just, obviously, we don't think that City Hall would be an option yet with the freeway. So any objection to us continuing Arbor Days at the old site next year at Midway?
Works well.
Sounds good.
Okay. And then Miss Islandbelt had asked us to show, Chris had done some slides for
Hang on one second.
Six Stones, and for some work that they're doing, and she wanted to give him an opportunity to show this to you, so.
So, I had a meeting the other day with some folks from Six Stones, and they are in the process of applying for a grant that they would plug back into the CPR program or other programs that they're doing. And it's from a private entity in Dallas, and so sounds like a great thing. What they were asking is, as part of this grant, they were struggling with a way to quantify. I think all of us believe that this is a worthwhile program, and we know intuitively what it's done in our city, but it is hard. In the process of this grant, it's multi-step, and the very first piece was more just written, and they weren't going to get an opportunity to maybe sit down and tell the story of what it's done to the community. So they were trying to do data, quantify what improvements were made. And so the request of the city was, can you somehow help us do that? We don't really know how to do that. Can you help us do it? And we brainstormed a little bit and went back, and I got to brag on David Allen here a little bit, because David sits over there in his office and does all kinds of stuff, and it's easy to forget what all he does, but man, he's good, and has a good head on his shoulders, can do some neat stuff. So what we did, it's maybe a little hard. Mr. Easton, will you hit that other light real here quick just for a second? Just both of them off, I'm sorry. May help a little bit. This is kind of the color's a little hard, but David was able to do his GIS stuff and do this little kind of heat maps, a little bit like what we do with the property value changes that we looked at Thursday night. And what he did is he looked at code violations from 2008 to 2012, and that's kind of during the years that the CPR program was just in its infancy in beginning. And we further took out all of the code violations that had nothing to do with something CPR might address. So we took out, multifamily code violations or what have you. So when you think of single-family code violations, and to be honest with you, I know in CPR, sometimes the yard gets mowed, but those are very snapshot things. 2 weeks later, the grass is tall. So we even took out high grass and weed complaints out of code violations. So if you think about single-family residential code violations, minus the things that aren't really applicable, like the examples I gave, and he was able to show that throughout the city. Now, the stars that you see on there are all of the houses in Euless that have been a part of the CPR program since it began to current. So just a minute to talk about the stars. One of the things that I thought was interesting is, wow, that's kind of neat. They are really pretty spread out pretty well throughout the city when you start looking at that. But you can also see that we've been doing those houses in these areas that we have higher instances of code violations. So these darker pinks or blues or whatever that is higher instances of code violations. So you pick another part of the city up there where you don't see much color. It's not that we didn't look at that part of the city or there wasn't a star there. I mean, this is code violations citywide overlaid over the stars, again, 2008 to 2012. Now, if you watch, when I click this slide, you're going to see a shift right here. And so what you saw, and it's a little hard because the colors are toned here, but we still have code violations shown, but some of the intensity has moved, and it's moved away from where we are doing a lot of those star areas. So if I go back, you'll see right now, let me see if I get my mouse over here. See in this area where these are darker intensity levels, and then when I go forward, a lot of that has shifted. So we were not necessarily drawing conclusions for Six Stones or CPR to be able to put in their report, other than providing them this data that we would believe show that there's been some association between kind of that broken window theory where you come in and do things and people take a little bit more pride in their neighborhood. So the other thing that David did
What's that spot up there?